Hello, today I'll be doing my presentation on interwar Germany and Western Europe by me, Nicholas Andronopoulos. So let's get into it. Introduction. So today I'll be focusing on the period between the world wars. This was 1919 to 1939. This was a time defined by political, economic, and cultural upheaval. This era represents a crisis of legitimacy for democracy, especially in nations that were recently embracing it. The main argument is that the convergent crises had paved the way for radical authoritarianism, most dramatically seen in Germany, and had also severely tested existing democratic systems in Western Europe like France and Britain. The four main areas that I'll be going into are the poison of Treaty of Versailles, the shock of the Great Depression, the appeal of extremist ideologies, and the role of mass culture in shaping political outcomes. So, the Treaty of Versailles and its impact. The foundation of the interwar world was the Treaty of Versailles. For Germany, the treaty had been a poison pill for them. Its term particularly the massive its terms, particularly the massive reparations payments for the infamous war, had destroyed its credibility had destroyed the credibility of the new Weimar Republic from day one. The German public had felt betrayed and victimized. This was compounded by Allied disagreements. France had been obsessed with national security and focused on punishing Germany, while Britain had sought to restore trade and stability. The lack of unified constructive vision from the victors had made the post war systems inherently unstable, allowing for the conditions for these extremist values to come to light. Foundations of the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic had suffered fatal internal flaws. Um, the first was right wing propaganda known as the stab in the back. This was a myth. This is propaganda claiming that the military had been betrayed by liberal politicians and was not defeated. Um, and those liberal politicians had signed the armistice. This narrative fatally poisoned public trust. The Constitution itself had been flawed, especially Article 48, which allowed the president to rule by emergency decree. This decree had been overused. This clause had been overused, teaching Germany public um, how authoritarian rule was normal. Was almost seen as normal for them. The economic shock of the 1923 hyperinflation destroyed the economic base of the middle class, and this group had traditionally been the most supportive of liberal democracy, um, showing that they were the main targets for these extremist parties. Great Depression's impact on Weimar. While the structural weaknesses of Weimar were clear, the Great Depression, starting in 1929, had provided the collapse. The global economic shock immediately halted American loans that had kept Germany afloat. These were short-term loans. The impact um, was very the impact was distinctive. This was because Germany had been dependent upon exports. Um, It saw its industrial output plummet, and employment soared to nearly 30% by 1932. This had created the mass base for impoverished, angry voters. Adding to the misery, governments across Europe, including Chancellor Brüning in Germany, clung to the gold standard, pursued deep austerity, cutting benefits, raising taxes, and this had only intensified the suffering and radicalized the population. Democracy stability in the West. So why did France and Britain not collapse like Germany had? The main reason was institutional strength. Both of these countries had century-old traditions of parliament rule that had enjoyed high public legitimacy. In the UK, the crisis was managed by forming a cross-party national government um, to, to battle um, communism, which demonstrated unity and absorbed the extremist threat. In France, despite significant political fragmentation, the primary response to fascism was the creation of left-wing Popular Front coalition in 1936. Um, this demonstrated that the democratic systems, though stressed, could still mobilize and unify to defend against authoritarian right. Rise of mass ideologies. Interwar era ushered in true mass politics. These parties could no longer rely on just elites. They had to rely on mobilizing millions. These extremist ideologies like fascism and Nazism were experts at this. They appealed to the desperate by offering simple, often scapegoating answers to complex problems. They promised decisive action and national glory directly to compromise, directly contrasting um, Parliament. Crucially, they projected street power using parliamentary groups like the SA and black shirts and to dominate public space, intimidate rivals, and create the illusion that they alone could restore order. Right, culture, media, and propaganda. The political crisis was mirrored in culture. Extremists, especially the Nazis, tapped into deep-sealed culture anxiety, railing against modern art, social liberalization. They harnessed new media, most notably was the radio. Just about every single radio, not radio, so just about every family in Germany had a radio, allowing mass widespread use of propaganda. Um, their propaganda had appealed directly to emotion, national myth, and almost religious cult of the leader, making politics more about faith than facts. Germany's path to authoritarianism was fast and brutal. The Great Depression had fueled the Nazis' party electoral surge. They became the biggest party in the Reichstag. However, Hitler did not take power in a revolution. He had been appointed chancellor in 1933 by conservative elites who believed they could control him. This was a very fatal miscalculation because within months Hitler had used a Reichstag fire decree to then push through the Enabling Act, which legally transferred all legislative power to the cabinet. This was the final step in this is the final legal step that permanently dismantled the Weimar Constitution and had established the Nazi dictatorship. It's important to remember that Nazism was not the only form of authoritarianism. Italy of fascism, led by Mussolini, provided crucial precedent, seizing power a decade earlier, following the March of Rome in 1922. Beyond fascism, much of Eastern and Southern Europe, including countries like Poland, Hungary, and Spain, fell to more traditional conservative authoritarianism. These regimes often were backed by military and church and focused on order and tradition. The difference is that fascism and Nazism were revolutionary. They were trying to seek transformation of society completely, while these conservative authoritarianism were focused mainly on maintaining existing power structures against threats like communism or liberal chaos. All right, so what explains different national responses? The legacy of World War One is paramount to Germany's defeat permanently tainted its new democratic system. Second, their economic structure mattered because Germany's reliance on foreign capital had made it exponentially more vulnerable to the crash in 1929 than nations like Britain with their colonial buffers. Um, Finally, political unity was key. In UK and France, the center and left were capable of uniting to defend the democratic state. In Germany, the socialist and communist parties had been divided, and this had fatally weakened anti-Nazi defense. The road to war and catastrophe. So, the interwar period was a tragic failure of democracy, overlapping crises, economic ruin, political chaos, and cultural anxiety. This had created the environment for extremism to thrive. Germany's unique mix of structural fragility and the humiliation from the Treaty of Versailles made it the most fertile ground for the most aggressive form of authoritarianism, Nazism. The ultimate failure was not just on Germany, but had also been the failure of the victorious parties to create a stable, peaceful post-war order, leading to the breakdown of collective security and the start of World War II. The core lesson from this remains that democratic institutions are fragile and require active defense against political, economic, and cultural pressures. These are my sources, and thank you.